there's a lot of good advice, tips and feedback and things like that on social media, from therapists, content creators, and so on and so forth. But make no mistake, that does not replace going to therapy or going to see a psychiatrist or psychologist and doing the work. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed therapist. I've been counseling women and men who have experienced abuse as well as those who have been perpetrators of abuse and other violent crimes for many years now. And I have a well-meaning response from a person, and I'm sure it's what a lot of people think, but she asked, why pay therapists, doctors, and social workers when you have them spilling the recipes on TikTok? This is, I would say, what I come on here and talk to you all about is about 10%, of the work and the things that I see, and so, and it's about 10% of the work in general. And so when you have people that, sort of talk about things in a general context, or whether they write about things, talk about them on a podcast, that's general self-help advice, and those things are very broad strokes. And while a lot of things are good, researched and so on and so forth, it is still very much broad stroke advice. There are millions of people that are sitting behind a computer, sitting behind a phone, whatever kind of device you're using to consume this stuff on, that have situations and things that they're going through. And I don't know everybody's situation. I don't know everyone's circumstance. Neither does anybody else who kind of does, gets on social media and talks. And so that's why you need a therapist. There are so many. You need someone you always need someone that's a good diagnostician, first of all. There's a lot of overlaps and things like that between diagnoses alone. You always need someone to sort of talk about your relationships with, because a really good therapist is going to, or psychologist or whatever, is going to examine your behavior in addition to the other person's behavior. So there's so many nuances and moving parts. In addition, culture and subculture also always needs to be explored. I know we're in a time when people are trying to eradicate the importance of culture and things like that, and say that, we're all the same. We don't need these differences and blah, blah, blah. Don't let that fool you. And that's why I get on here almost at least, several times a week and talk about culture, because it's so much more important now than ever. You are going to look different, depending on your culture and practices and things like that. Things are going to manifest differently. And so there's a lot of moving parts. And a lot of times people take, well-meaning people, educated people, they think they have the same thought and sentiment, such as yourself, like, oh, Dr. Jones said this, and I think this applies perfectly to my situation, and I'm going to operate as such. And they're inaccurate. That's why you come to people like me, because I can diagnose things more accurately. I have years of training and experience in this stuff, something which most people do not, that are kind of consuming my content. So you want to be careful with that. I can't tell you how many people come to me and they say, well, I think I have borderline personality disorder. I think I'm suicidal, or I think my spouse is this, or I think, or there's some sort of thing that they picked up online or in a book, and they've taken that and they've ran with it. And I'm like, where did you get that from? Because it's incorrect. But they've tried to make the pieces fit, fit to them, fit to their narrative, and fit to their story. And they've done their best to try to work with that and say, well, I've just sort of diagnosed myself with this because this is what makes sense. And I have these symptoms and blah, blah, blah. And that, you want to be careful with that, because diagnosis, have a lot of overlap. Um, but despite the overlap, you really need a good diagnostician to be able to flesh things out. So in addition to, talking with you all, I do research, I write, and this isn't something that I just started yesterday. This is something that I've been doing for years. I look at psychological and perform psychological assessments and testings and write reports. And I have to also be able to explain and justify this and why I think this way and be able to support these things this way. So that's why you kind of pay people the bucks, as you say, because we're professionals and we know what we're doing. We have a license, it's regulated. I'm not just talking out of my butt, and unfortunately you have some people that get on here and do, and I know some of the big names up here with huge followings that you people do it because I am a podcaster. And part of doing my work as a podcaster, I invite people on and I interview them all the time, but they can't talk about it in depth clinically because all they've done is get on here and sort of piggyback off of what I've said or what some other content creator has said, but they don't know the work. And that's where you're really going to be able to tell is when someone is just sort of parroting what they hear without being able to expand on that clinically. And, that makes a big difference because I do it on here with you all, but I also do it on, legally and things like that. So my work goes beyond what you guys get on here and see. And while it may resonate and while it may be good, you want to be careful with that. And I've worked with a lot of pathological people, right? People with pathology, excuse me, and personality disorders and things like that. People who've done bad things, and guess what? They come on here and say, "I've been abused." Dr. Jones, I was abused. My people abused me and things like that. So there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people that kind of, take, bits and pieces and, want to run with that. And, sometimes you want to run with that to court and other places like that. But you really need someone who is good at doing all of that. So, be careful with taking whether it's my advice or anybody else's and kind of taking it and running with it. You are not a therapist, you are not a doctor, you're not a social worker. You have to go to school and get the education. And even within our profession, even within my profession, not everybody's good and not everybody's qualified and not everybody does the work. Because now you have a lot of schools that are popping up like online and things like that, where people don't actually have to do all these internships and things like that I've had to do. And so that's a new sort of phenomenon that's taking off. But it is to each his own. But our work is very valued, and I myself, I go see a professional, even if I feel like I've done all the things, and I come on here and talk to you all. I still have to go see an objective professional that can counsel me and, you know, talk to me and tell me and help me lay out my own stuff. Just for the simple fact that even though I know a lot of things and I've done a lot of clinical work, I still need that objectivity to really sort of lay things out and even give me a fresh way of thinking about certain things. So AI cannot, I'm not concerned about AI. I'm not concerned about anybody else who comes on here and tries to parrot what I say, because there's a lot more in here, and this is maybe about 5 to 10% of it. And so just be careful with thinking that you can take bits and pieces and now your life makes complete and utter sense. There's so much more that needs to be done in terms of unpacking and actually doing the work. You will never, ever, ever be able to shortchange and undercut the work. And I know a lot of people are trying to bypass that now, but it always shows, and it's always going to bottom out on the other side. Thanks so much for this. Bye-bye.